Welcome to the long way around. My name is Malcolm Byrne. You're listening to WKNY Radio Kingston, 1490 AM on the dial, 107.9 FM, and on the internet at radiokingston.org. I hope you enjoyed the previous program, First Voices Radio. It's always instructional and worth listening to. So thank you, Tiokasin. Tonight I have a very special guest. Jill Stein is a physician, an environmental health advocate, and an organizer. In 2006, she transitioned from clinical medicine into political medicine to help heal the mother of all illnesses, our sick political system that's literally killing us. As the Green Party's presidential candidate in 2012 and 2016, she helped bring national attention to the green agenda, from an emergency Green New Deal to Medicare for all, a student debt bailout, reparations, and a foreign policy based on diplomacy, international law, and human rights. Dr. Jill Stein is now running as a Green Party candidate for president and is on track to put a pro-worker, anti-war, climate emergency choice on the ballot for voters across 50 states. Welcome to the program, Jill Stein.
It's really great to be with you, Malcolm.
It's so great to see you again. You probably don't remember me because I was probably just a face in the crowd, but I think it was in 2016 up in, I think it was Troy, New York, and it was yourself and a few other people doing a presentation talk, and we were in the audience cheering you on and rooting for you, and I voted for you in that election, as I have voted for Howie Hawkins in the last election, and will vote for you. And, well, I shouldn't be really displaying my politics on the radio too heavily, but I'm an honest person, so there you go. Anyway, how are you doing?
Great. Yeah. And thank you for that very kind introduction. And yeah, I definitely remember your name, and your face looks familiar. I can't remember exactly the event, but I'm sure there's lots of connection.
Yeah, I mean, with your schedule, I'm sure that, it all blurs. I used to be in a band, and, somebody says, remember that gig you did in so-and-so in Winnipeg? And I'm like, no, not at all. But I think it was in a church facility, and it was in the basement, of course, of the church. And there was, I think there was someone from the Socialist Party or somebody like that was also on the ballot or on the bill speaking. But, I became extremely interested in what you were talking about in 2016 because, for a lot of different reasons. But first I want to ask you a very clear question, which is, I'd like you to define what you call the term political medicine.
So I explain how I got here, saying that I was doing clinical medicine as a doctor that I was trained to be, and just discovered there was so much that you can't touch in the traditional medical role. It's like you deal with disease and illness after it's a done deal. People come in when they're sick.
Right.
And then it's very hard to fix things up, and things are so often driven by, your physical environment, your food, in a very degraded corporate food system where people can't, it's very hard to get your hands on good and nutritious food, especially if you don't have a lot of money to pay for it. And,
sure.
And just kind of the stress levels that people live with. People are made sick in so many ways. And so anyhow, that's what I mean about, that's part of what I mean about political medicine. I went from medicine to the world of advocacy, and I became very involved in trying to change policy, especially around air pollution and coal plants and incinerators and, food quality, a lot of it having to do with pollution and just degraded food systems. And, I discovered it's very hard. You can come to, with legislation, you can go to the powers that be and have good fixes. But unless you come with big campaign contributions and lobbyist budgets, doesn't matter. And that was just so infuriating to me to see that there were these big coalitions to make stuff happen, like whether it was, around improving air quality and shutting down polluting facilities and moving to renewable energy and recycling our trash, stuff like that. That was so infuriating because there were systems that were ready to go. We just had to kind of switch over the funding, and the powers that be weren't going to make it happen. There's just no way, in spite of motherhood and apple pie, and an economy that really favored doing that, and it still didn't matter. So anyway, as I was getting really frustrated with all that, one other thing I should mention, we passed campaign finance reform in my state through a voter referendum, overwhelmingly by a 2-to-1 margin. And after we passed it, the progressive Democrats who run our state repealed it on a voice vote because they didn't want to give up their advantages and their big funders and how the system works. And for me, that was like the last straw. So when I then got, arm twisted by Greens in my state to run for governor, I said, sort of, sure, why not? Everything else has failed. Might as well try that. And that was actually a wonderful experience, and opened up to me a whole other way of making change, that you really can't do it from on top. You can't do it through a corrupt system. You really have to change the system, and you need to build coalitions to make that happen. So that's what I mean about, political medicine, because the politics is the sickness, and you can't fix the other sicknesses unless you fix sort of the master driver of this very diseased and corrupt society, and this alliance of economic and political elites that are in bed with each other and keep things running the way they are, which is great if you're in the top 5 or 10%, but everybody else is really being driven off the cliff right now. We're seeing that in so many ways, whether it's the climate or our totally dysfunctional healthcare system, or student debt that nobody can get out of, or any other kind of debt you want to look at. Things are just getting more and more really in the toilet all the time, whatever issue you look at, and especially our foreign policy, which is really going berserk right now.
Yeah.
And it's a big mobilizing moment right now, a big wake up moment for a lot of people. So to me, that's like, it's like we can't fix the stuff that's literally threatening our lives right now without also fixing our political system. It's sort of the sickness that's driving everything else.
But, I'm going to show my colors here, but, I'm from Canada, and when I first came to the United States, I was baffled that there's only 2 political parties. There are more than 2 political parties, but there's really this, what we call, I think you've called it, a 2-party duopoly. Mm-hmm. And to me, that system is completely dysfunctional, and I saw it in full action when I attended the Democratic National Committee Rules Committee meeting in 2016. I saw how it works, and I thought, wow, no wonder the system is not working. But the thing about the Green Party in particular is accusations have been leveled ever since Ralph Nader ran, back in 2020. Oh, if it wasn't for Ralph Nader, Bush wouldn't have become president. And then they started saying the same old tropes in 2016. And I'm sure we're going to hear that again. Oh, we can't have 3 parties in this country. It could never work. What do you say to skeptics of that idea?
Yeah, so first let me just point out that there's a whole bunch of people running now. So you have RFK, you've got Cornel West, several other independent candidates, and you have the Green Party, you also have No Labels. Our political system, it's like the center will not hold, and it's just spinning apart right now. And, some of those alternatives are more or less, in my mind, truly alternatives. Some of them are kind of the same thing. Like No Labels is really a corporate front group. It's just run by a few guys with very deep pockets who are funding this thing, and it doesn't even pretend to have an actual party.
So it's not really a grassroots movement on any level, unless you
No, it
very
is
tall grass.
yes, very tall grass, and it's astroturf, so it's fake grass, at that too. And so there are just so many symptoms. And, if like you look at polls, people are clamoring for other options. It's like 63% in Gallup, and they do this poll every year. It's at an all-time record high. People who say that the political system, the two-party trap, has failed us, and people are tired of being thrown under the bus, and they want other options. You can look at polls that show 20% right now of Hispanics, African Americans, and 21% of youth have already said they're not voting for either of the two major parties. And that's, and things are just beginning, and they haven't even really heard what their options are. So I would say, who are these pundits, who tell us that we don't have a right to choose? What is this? What a mockery of democracy, that you have to just keep voting for the same thing. And some higher ups are deciding, they're not even holding primary in the Democratic Party. They're canceling primaries all over the place. And they refuse to acknowledge, candidates they don't like. They just want to anoint Joe Biden and push him through. So we have these two zombie candidates who were not, their favorability is awful, and people are largely voting for the person they choose because they hate the other so much.
Right.
And that's a democracy. So it's come on, where do you get off saying this, that it spoils an election to actually allow people to have the choices that they're demanding? Mm-hmm. That is spoiled. Well, I'm sorry, politicians don't own your vote, and the establishment parties don't own your vote. They have to earn your vote. And anybody who says otherwise should, they have disqualified themselves from the get-go from, being in any position of giving you political advice. So don't listen to them. And those spoiler arguments, they're all cherry-picked. They really, the biggest voting bloc are those who aren't voting. So to pretend that, well, first of all, Greens don't take votes away from other candidates. We bring people in who otherwise aren't going to vote. I mean, for the most part, that's true. And the effort to smear Ralph Nader, well, he was one of about 6 candidates who all could have been blamed for that difference. But, the big, the elephant in the room is that there were hordes of Democrats who were crossing over to vote for George Bush, way more than the number of votes that Ralph Nader got. So, this is just a concocted, who was it? Samuel Clemens, I think, who said there's lies, damn lies, and statistics. So this is just a case in point of people who are using numbers to try to wow you and make you think, oh, this must be really true and scientific and impressive. Don't believe it. It's look at your life. How's your life going? How's your job? How's your savings? How's your bank account? What's your retirement looking like? How much debt are you in? And hold people accountable for having created this mess. And it's fixable. So really listen to how it can be fixed, and don't let yourself be extorted into voting for, this political mafia that kind of wants your money in your life.
Well, again, along this track, a very one of my oldest and dearest friends who lives in Texas, and he also happens to be Jewish. And we had a conversation about, because for some reason the next election came up, and I just sort of flippantly said, well, I'm not going to vote for either of these, carcasses. If it ends up being Donald Trump, which it's sort of pointing in that direction, we don't know for sure. Obviously, a lot of things can happen between now and then, but let's say hypothetically that is the case. And he said, in absolute sincerity, he said, you don't understand. I'm a Jew and I live in Texas, and we've had our synagogue, we've been harassed by, rednecks, and, if you don't vote for Biden, you might as well be voting for Donald Trump, and you'll be another one of those people who's responsible, And I just sort of looked at my friend and I said, "What are you telling me that I don't have a choice? Like I have to vote for I have to vote against somebody out of fear?"
Mm-hmm.
And he was very upset with me. I mean, sincerely upset to the point where we almost lost our friendship over this discussion.
Mm-hmm.
And I've had this exact same conversation with many, many, many people,
Mm-hmm.
and it's probably a rhetorical question, really.
Well, no, I mean, I would love to comment on that because so many people get stuck there. And I think it's really important to remember, where did this Trumpism thing come from? The big, the biggest transition moment where the Democrats lost their grip was the election of 2010. What happened in 2010? The Democrats lost 64 seats in Congress. In the House. They lost 12 seats in the Senate.
And President Obama was still president at that time, correct?
That's right. It was his midterms. And I'll come back to that in just a second. They lost 13 governorships and they lost 1,000 seats in state legislatures. This was right after the Wall Street bailouts. Wall Street got bailed out, homeowners got thrown out. That's when the big shift happened. That's when people abandoned the Democratic Party and went over to the Republicans. They were so pissed off. And that anger persisted at the Democrats and manifest in these, lunatic Republicans. But the driver there, Donald Trump and the crazy Republicans are not just the drivers, they're also the symptom. They're the symptom of a very corrupt economic and political system that was throwing people under the bus. That's where Donald Trump comes from. So by voting for Donald Trump, you are further establishing Joe Biden. Or let me say, by voting for Joe Biden, you are further establishing Donald Trump.
Right.
Yeah.
No, that was kind of the logic that I pursued with my friend.
And people largely aren't going to hear it. But the fortunate thing is you don't need them to hear it. The question is empowering people who already know it to vote, because many of them don't know that they have other choices. In fact, right now there is this abandoned Biden movement. I don't know if you've heard about this, but this is growing out of the Palestinian rights movement and kind of the utter, terror that's going on. And people are looking at 2 million lives just kind of hanging by a thread right now. And so anyhow, a lot of the younger people who are paying a lot of attention to this and who are absolutely horrified at Joe Biden, they're very focused now on Joe Biden. So it's all about abandoning Biden. Some of them are going over to Trump because they don't know that Trump is bad.
It's a shame.
But there are other options. So it's like people who think that third parties are the spoiler. No, it's the election is being spoiled and third parties can rescue it and put some integrity back into it. And so we're, telling people the politics of fear has brought us everything we were afraid of. We need to forget the politics of fear, and forget the lesser evil and go for the greater good. We got to start thinking about what we want and driving things with our moral compass and our vision of where we're going. We can't just be forced into these two little pigeonholes and think that somehow we're going to get there by trading between these two horrible pigeonholes. And you can split hairs about which one you think is going to have worse policies. But at the end of the day, they feed off of each other and they're very happy, because they have a nice little field day for Wall Street, and the weapons industry. And that's where they agree. Mm-hmm. They agree on endless war and endless profit for Wall Street. So Democrats and Republicans are doing just fine. And it doesn't matter that much which one wins, because they're both protecting the same system, while 80% of America is really going down the tubes right now in a terrible way. So this is a wake-up time. And we're seeing a lot of people really, waking up. And the numbers are there, just look at, there are 68%, according to one of the major polls, about, what's going on in Gaza and the whole Israel-Gaza thing. It's like 68% want an immediate ceasefire and a diplomatic solution. But you don't see that in Congress at all.
No, they're all stepping
Bernie
in line.
Sanders has kind of started raising some waves, but it took him an awful long time, and he's not going very far at this point. None of them are, except maybe Rashida Tlaib. But otherwise, they couldn't utter peep during the Ukraine war either. It's like there are life-saving, world-saving solutions available to us. They won't go there. They're just all creatures of AIPAC and kind of the echo chamber of the AIPAC Congress. So it's crazy. The point there being that there are plenty of people. We don't hear it in the power holders, and we're not going to hear it in mainstream media. But if you're talking to everyday people, they are fighting angry, and they're ready to vote for change and to work for change. The issue is reaching them.
Mm-hmm. One last question, then we have to go to a quick public service break. Well, it's more of it's a counterpoint for the sake of rhetorical argument sake. What would you say to somebody who said, yes, but, that there is this difference between, for example, Joe Biden and if it were Biden and Trump again, that when it comes to domestic policy, we're going to, they're going to overturn Roe v. Wade and we're going to lose all our Social Security and all the rest of it, and that's why you should still vote for Joe Biden. How do you respond to that argument?
Yeah, so, I find over and over again the promises don't get kept, and we wind up in a very similar position. So let me just explain, like, for example, on the climate, you hear from everybody that, the climate really depends on Biden being reelected. Well, actually, if you look at Biden's actual policies, this Inflation Reduction Act, it contains these utter, just devastation for the climate. Like, it does some great things for renewable energy and for solar installations and electric vehicles. Yeah, that's great. But you know what? The climate doesn't actually care about that. The climate cares about the production of CO2. And so if you look at what the Inflation Reduction Act does, it requires 60 million acres every year of offshore waters, and 2 million acres every year have to be used for fossil fuel projects before you can build any major renewables. So it basically gives away the store to renewables. And the other thing Joe Biden is doing is building out 22 new LNG, liquid natural gas export facilities. And according to the Sierra Club, that is the equivalent of 440 new coal plants, which will knock us back. It will reverse all progress that we've made since 2005. I haven't heard of anything that Donald Trump is doing that's bad, that is that bad. So, Biden has, done more offshore oil drilling than Trump did, and also on land. So all these promises, they don't hold up at all when you actually get down to business. And, if you have people who are active and who are a political force, that counts for something. And you don't want to just bury your agency by supporting some lesser evil candidate who at the end of the day is going to sell you out as well, every bit as much.
You're listening to WKNY, and my special guest tonight is Jill Stein, who's running as the presidential candidate for the Green Party. Welcome back to the show, Jill. Thank you for giving some of your valuable time to us. I know you're probably very busy.
My pleasure, absolutely.
I thought maybe we, because, we try and do some music to lighten things up a little bit, maybe we could, you kindly sent me a playlist of some stuff that we could listen to. I thought we'd start off with this track by Leadbelly called The Midnight Special. And perhaps you could intro the song and tell me why it's near and dear to your heart.
I grew up outside of Chicago, and there was a whole folk music scene happening then in the, I guess I started listening in the late 50s and the early 60s. And, that was like what I grew up on. I lived for this program that was kind of, traditional, old-timey folk music with the likes of Leadbelly, and the program was called the Midnight Special, and it would, so I would stay up like really late for an 8-year-old, and
Was that on TV or the radio?
That was on the radio. I think it was, what was it called?
Because there was a TV thing called the Midnight Special with Wolfman Jack.
Oh, really? Okay, yeah, no, that was like, I guess that was way beyond me. I was just like listening to the radio.
In those days, we didn't even have TV.
Oh yeah, I know. We didn't either.
Barely, actually.
And the radio, I mean, that program was such a window into the world for me. And that song sort of, like encapsulated that program. And it was kind of, it was like nothing that I was in my world, growing up in the 50s, which was this really kind of sanitized, sterilized, Cold War world. And suddenly here was all this wisdom coming from, Black folk singers. And it was just mind-boggling to me. And Pete Seeger, and the like, before folk music got really commercialized. And I had a neighbor across the street who was like a folk musician, and he would have hootenannies every Saturday night live at his house. And so I was growing up with this really vibrant folk music culture around me, not all over the place, just in very selected places. And it had to me, it was like a light. It was like a beacon for where this was reality, and this was like really where, where life was, and truth, and and it was like amazing to me. It was like a multicolored world, and a world where the Cold War 1950s was just, it was a monotone black and white, and then here was this stuff in just vibrant real color. And so that's kind of what that song meant to me.
Well, here's Leadbelly with Midnight Special. You're on the long way around.
She wore umbrella on her shoulder, a piece of paper in her hand. Well, I'm going out to Captain. They're trying to loosen my man. Let the midnight special shine a light on me. Let the midnight special shine a heaven loving light on me. When you get up in the morning, when that big bell rings, goes a marching to the table. You meet the same old thing, knocking poker on the table. Ain't nothing in my pants. Never said nothing about it. Have a trouble with you, man. Let the midnight special shine a light on me. Let the midnight special shine a heaven loving light on me. If you ever go to Houston, oh, you better walk right. And you better not squabble. And you better not fight, Bed Brocker will arrest you. Hit the boom and take it down. You can bet your bottom dollar that you're Sugarland bound. Let the midnight special shine a light on me. Let the midnight special shine a heaven loving light on me. Well, jumping little Judy, she was a mighty fine girl. She brought jumping. There's a whole round world where she brought it in the morning. There's a wife all day where she brought me the news. And my wife was dead, that started me to grieving. We've been hollering and crying. Then I began to worry about a great long time. Let the midnight special shine a light on me. Let the midnight special shine a heaven loving light on me.
Leadbelly, Midnight Special. I know exactly what you mean about having that sort of light come on with music, like, because I had a similar experience probably like 10 years later, living up in Northern Ontario, where somebody said, "Have you ever heard of this guy called Lightning Sam Hopkins?" And I was like, "Nope." And I went and bought this record, and bam, it was like same thing. It was like a revelation,
Yeah.
Yeah. The great thing about music is it's so it communicates, on a level that words and visuals just can't. Hopefully it does something, which I hope it always does, which is bring us together.
Yeah.
It's dumb to have arguments about Lead Bearley was better than Howlin' Wolf. There's so many questions I want to ask you, but one that is, of course, weighing very heavily on all of our minds right now is, and I'm sure that you have a strong opinion and a knowledgeable opinion. I'd like you to weigh in on the court case that South Africa has rolled in the International Court of Justice against Israel in the charge of genocide.
Yeah. I think the facts are overwhelming. They speak for themselves. I think it's incontrovertible that this is genocide. If anything ever was, this is. 23,000 lives, more than that now, murdered, and almost half of them children, like 70% women, and are women, elders, children, very vulnerable people. This is not Hamas. And the conflict did not begin on October 7th. And yes, what Hamas did was horrific and worthy of condemnation, in my view. You can never attack civilians. But there was a long history before that, of ethnic cleansing, and just the violence of daily life under apartheid. And there's just so much evidence of that. But just starting, with what we're talking about here, which is the genocide. I was at an event last night. I was at the rally in DC.
Oh, yes. It was huge, right?
Saturday. Oh, my God. It was the biggest event I've ever been at. It's estimated at 400,000, but to me, it was just like an ocean of people in every direction as far as the eye could see. And the speakers were extremely, compelling, especially hearing the families from Gaza. And, it's just no secret about what's going on there. It's unbelievable, the assault. I mean, it has broken all records for physical destruction and numbers of people killed so quickly. So it's like it's death and destruction on steroids against a civilian population who are being ethnically cleansed, forced down to basically the Egyptian crossing, though they can't get out, and they don't want to leave their homes. And if you look back over the whole course of, 75 years, this has kind of been what's going on. And this is just sort of now like the ultimate expression of it, that there's been ethnic cleansing from the start. 750,000 people who were ethnically cleansed at the founding of the state of Israel. And, uncountable numbers of deaths. Some say it was tens of thousands. Some say it was more. But, this has been a very vicious occupation from the get-go. And even when there wasn't outright fighting going on, and who wouldn't defend themselves under these circumstances? And there's been one power holder and then an utterly defenseless and largely unarmed people. And now they're being starved, deprived of water. They have no housing. They've been bombed out of their housing. They've been told to flee along pathways that are said to be safe, and then it turns out they're not safe. They're bombed as they're fleeing. They're bombed when they get to the safe zone. Refugee camps are bombed. They have dropped these 2,000-pound bunker busters 200 times on safe zones. These aren't mistakes that are happening. I mean, it's really, once you see the facts here, you can't really view it any other way. There's just, the facts don't leave you room. And then you have all these very explicit statements from power holders and the leadership of Israel that they are purposefully eliminating a population that they consider evil. And there's just no question about it. The problem with this case, and I have to say, it's so inspirational that South Africa brought this forward. South Africa, who knows what apartheid looks like? And now there have been, dozens of other countries that have joined them.
It's like
So
50,
the world,
50 countries.
is it 50? The world understands what's going on here. There's just no secret. It's just the US and Israel that are hell-bent on defending what Ronald Reagan's Secretary of Defense, Caspar Weinberger, called the America's unsinkable battleship in the Middle East, defending our interests. That's sort of the purpose that Israel serves. Now, this is not to deny the reality of anti-Semitism.
Of course not.
And and it does not deny the horror of the Holocaust. But those facts make it all the more important that Israel and anyone who pretends to represent the Jewish people not perpetrate these same evils all over again. And we need to observe international law and human rights and hold everyone to it. That includes Hamas as well. But you can wipe out Hamas and you're just going to produce the next Hamas. When you're murdering civilians right and left. It's 4% of the population now that has been either murdered or injured. And what happens when they're injured? They're denied medical care too, because there's a total embargo on them. They are being starved, dehydrated to death, denied shelter. They're living out on the street. They are they are under air assault. They are crowded into these tiny spaces. They have no access to sanitation. Babies poop. What do you do if you don't have diapers? And then you can't wash them. I mean, this is just a disaster. I can't imagine how people are surviving.
It's beyond me. It's absolutely beyond me.
It's torture. I mean, this is torture. An entire population of 2 million people is being tortured. They're being driven like cattle. Just running for their lives. It reminds me of the Jews being herded into boxcars and shipped off to concentration camps. This is just, it's just horrifying. The problem is that the International Court of Justice, the World Court, it's also called, is a political institution, and
right. Almost all the judges are,
allies, yes.
White, European, whatever's people.
So how are they going to, find Israel guilty of genocide, and then Joe Biden and Anthony Blinken are thereby implicated, and they'll be on trial as well. So it's just hard to see how this goes forward, which is why we have launched, I'm running for office, and I had decided to run even before this started. But once this started, I was so grateful that we're running and we have ballot lines and we are working on more of them so that we're going to be a choice all over the country.
I was going to actually ask you about this very difficult uphill slog about ballot access and how that's going, because I know how hard that is.
Well, it's going great, mainly because we already had earned ballot lines. We're now at 20, but that's not just any 20 states. We have done most of the very difficult and large states. So if you actually tally up the total cost of the whole thing and the number of signatures you need to get, we are 75% of the way there right now.
Excellent.
So we're cruising, and we still have to raise $1 million, but that's nothing compared to RFK and Cornel West, and even No Labels. They have to raise, RFK says he's trying to raise $18 million to get on the ballot. We have to raise maybe 1.5.
Why is
so
that?
This is really doable because he's at the very beginning. California alone is just, you have to get hundreds of thousands of signatures, I think.
Right.
And signatures generally cost about $5, $6, $7, $8 a hit.
Mm-hmm.
So it's going to cost millions of dollars just to get on the ballot in California. And you can't just collect the number of signatures that you want. You have to collect about twice as many because some of them will be disqualified and all that.
Mm.
So, we are just way ahead of the game. RFK just got on his first ballot. So he's on in one state, Utah, and Cornel West is on in one state. And we got 75% of this done. So anybody who wants to see an anti-genocide, a pro-worker, anti-war, anti-genocide climate emergency choice on the ballot, when all the other candidates are going to, the rest of them who will be on the ballot nationally are basically dividing up the corporate pro-war, pro-Wall Street vote. So all bets are off about what's going to happen here. We could see a pro-war vote that gets divided 4 ways. And we could be the other alternative that people are clamoring for. So I'd say don't let them talk you out of your power. We have the numbers here. The numbers are overwhelming. People don't want to see genocide committed, especially not with our tax dollars and in our name. And it's not only genocide, but, we say what happens in Gaza doesn't stay in Gaza. As Gaza goes, we all go. If we lower the bar to where genocide happens and we all just turn our heads, get ready, fascism's coming here. And when people worry about, there's fascist Trump coming along. Well, I'm sorry, but the hallmark of fascism is genocide. And we got that going on right now. Genocide Joe has done that for us. So it's pretty bad right now. We need to stand up and use the power that we have, the power of our numbers. So we have a pledge to stop genocide, which is basically, standing up to be counted, to say that we're going to use our votes here to stop genocide. And if you go to our website, you can get into that pledge. It's jillstein2024.org. Sign that pledge and tell everybody who doesn't want to see. Yeah, I know a lot of people in powerful positions and politically and economically fortunate people want to stay the course. And hey, if we have to have a little genocide, that's just the price that we pay. But most people are not in that place. Most Americans have not lost their soul. And polls show that, especially younger people and people of color. People are not in kind of elite positions. So there's enormous momentum here to change this. And so we're encouraging people, sign the pledge so we can stand up and be counted. And then we can't be discounted and brushed off. We don't have to wait for the election to show our power. We need to show our power right now.
Well, I'll make sure that we, when we post this show to social media and so forth, we'll try and include that link for people.
Great.
So,
Great.
I wanted to jump into another subject altogether, but I thought before we do that, let's get back to a little bit of music. And I thought when I was a kid growing up, I used to love this song. I used to live not too far from Ottawa in Ontario, and it was just when they were starting to build these, suburbs and housing developments. And we used to listen to this song and look at the houses, and they're all made. So please introduce Little Boxes by Pete Seeger.
Yeah, I mean, that's what it was to me, too. This song, Little Boxes on the hillside, little boxes made of ticky-tacky, little boxes, and they all look just the same. There's a pink one and a green one and a blue one and a yellow one, and they're all made out of ticky-tacky, and they all look just the same. And then it's about, it tells the story about, and they all play on the golf course and drink their martinis dry, and they all have little children, and the children go to school, and the children go to summer camp, and then to the university, and they're all made out of ticky-tacky, and they all look just the same. And I was growing up in the suburbs, and there was lots of these little ticky-tacky housing developments, and everybody was, playing on the golf carts and drinking their martinis dry, and then getting ready to go to college and just rinse and repeat, and then came the Vietnam War, and a few other little wake up shocks, and the assassinations, of the
Martin Luther King, Malcolm X,
and all that.
John F. Kennedy.
Yeah. So this song was it was part of that wake up. I mean, it came before those events, but to me, it just ridiculed what really needed to be ridiculed.
Well, here's Pete Seeger with Little Boxes.
Little boxes on the hillside, little boxes made of ticky-tacky, little boxes, little boxes, little boxes all the same. There's a green one and a pink one and a blue one and a yellow one, and they're all made out of ticky-tacky, and they all look just the same. and the people in the houses all went to the university, and they all got put in boxes, little boxes all the same. And there's doctors and there's lawyers and business executives, and they all get put in boxes and they all come out the same. And they all play on the golf course and drink their martini dry, and they all have pretty children, and the children go to school, and the children go to summer camp, and then to the university, and they all get put in boxes and they all come out the same. And the boys go into business and marry and raise a family, and they all get put in boxes, little boxes all the same. There's a green one and a pink one and a blue one and a yellow one, and they all made out of ticky-tacky, and they all look just the same.
Pete Seeger, Little Boxes, and yes, they do all look the same. We're on the radio with Jill Stein, running for the Green Party for president of these here United States. Thank you so much for sharing your valuable time and knowledge.
Really, my honor really to be here, Malcolm.
Really so grateful to have you on the show. I don't want to get into too much of a tit for tat with the members of the squad, but how did you feel when they sort of co-opted the term Green New Deal? Because that was you came up with that, as far as I recall.
Well, ours was the first campaign to sort of make it national, but it was actually the Greens in Europe who had come up, I think, with the name and the concept, and then it was developed here. Howie Hawkins actually developed it at the state level a lot, and it was just kind of continually growing. And then in 2012, we went national with it. And yeah, I mean, it's like how the Democrats co-opt everything, and they turned healthcare as a human right into Obamacare, which was previously Romney Care in Massachusetts. It was kind of a business concept, really, that kind of hijacked.
Well, I'd like you to describe your vision of Medicare for all as opposed to this corporatized, dysfunctional version of it that we're now kind of stuck with.
Oh my God. Yeah, no, what we have is not Medicare for all in the least. What we have is this abomination, Medicare, which has increasingly become Medicare Advantage. It's a sort of corporatized Medicare, and it's very abusive, and it shortchanges people, and it's expensive. Well, now let me say Medicare itself, not the Medicare Advantage, which is like the corporate version, but Medicare is the most efficient and affordable form of healthcare. And so the notion of actually putting it back together again and fleshing it out so it includes, your eyeglasses and hearing and, extending the age so you don't have to wait till you're 65, but it's really from conception to grave and from head to toe, and includes mental health. I mean, that's what healthcare for all should be. It should be a comprehensive program, and it takes the middleman out of it. You still choose your provider and all that. It's what people really like about old-fashioned Medicare, but it makes it much bigger and comprehensive, and it saves so much money. Right now, 1 out of every $3 that you pay for healthcare goes for paper pushing and red tape and figuring out which insurance plan do you have and what do they pay for. And so you have these huge departments that do nothing but track who's supposed to get paid and what was that contract. It's just a make-work program for bureaucrats and insurance companies. And it drains 1/3 of every healthcare dollar that you spend is not on healthcare. It's basically for insurance companies. So Medicare for all gets rid of all of that, and it consolidates it into one insurer. So you don't have to track who pays for what, you know who pays for it. And that right there saves so much money that we can expand healthcare to cover everybody, cover everything else, including mental health care and eyes and hearing and chronic care and home care. It's like, it's almost too good to believe. Everything gets covered and it saves a whole lot of money. Even after including everybody, it still saves $500 billion a year. It's just mind-boggling that this is not seized as such a cost-saving measure that would just benefit everything else about the economy.
Well,
and take the pressure off of small businesses too, which is a huge thing. Go ahead.
No, and needless to say, when you have a healthy population, it's better for the economy.
Yeah.
I mean, seriously, like, I know people who just don't go to the doctor until they have to because they don't want to know. And second of all, they can't afford the bills. So they wait until they're really sick. And then it's like, well, sir, you've got, pancreatic cancer and you're going to die or you're going to have to be on life support, and what's the difference? I mean, pardon my kind of somewhat ignorance, but what's the difference between Medicare for all and a single payer, or are they kind of one and the same thing?
The only difference is that single payer was what it was called initially. And so they were kind of describing the fact that instead of having a gazillion insurance companies that gobble up your healthcare dollar, you only have one single kind of governmental entity. That's the single payer. And then they decided, well, maybe it'll do better if we change the name to Medicare for All. And it turned out that the insurance companies are fighting back and Big Pharma's fighting back anyhow. So the name didn't really change it, but it did make it more, kind of a better description of what it is. That's the only difference. So it's called single payer when Ralph Nader, actually, it was a Green presidential campaign that introduced that at the national level as well. So we've done a whole lot of introductions. I would add student debt, abolishing student debt, which was very controversial when I introduced it, and I was ridiculed. John Oliver.
Not anymore.
Not anymore. No, not at all. Same, yeah.
They love to eat their words.
Across the board. And the Democrats, do their watered down version. You had asked, how did I feel when the squad took the Green New Deal? It's like, I don't waste time or emotional energy actually worrying about the foibles of the politics of war on Wall Street and the progressive coalition. Maybe they mean well, but they sure don't stand up and fight. So I don't really spend time thinking about them because I don't see them as the solution. I do have a lot of respect for Rashida Tlaib for standing up and fighting around Gaza, so I really got to give her a lot of kudos. But I can't imagine how she's going to survive because she's already announced that she's not going to vote for Joe Biden. So I would assume she's, on her way out of the party. But I hope she declares her independence because
maybe she'll jump on board with the Green Party or do something sensible.
It would be really exciting, and I would love to talk with her.
Well, if I happen to run into her in the halls of Congress, I'll nudge her, but I doubt it. Well, we're almost out of time, and I wanted to ask you just to summarize, in the few minutes that we have left, just last words. So, you know what I mean, to just sort of seal the deal.
Yeah. I would say that, this is a really historic wake-up moment right now, for so many people because we are crashing and burning, as a society. And, we have these kind of existential crises. No matter what direction you look, our economy is, really in the doldrums. Yeah, Wall Street's doing great and stock market is doing great, but that's like the 10% and the 60-70% are just being crushed right now. 60% of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck, and half of people who are renting can hardly make the rent and, are economically stressed and they're paying way too much. It's like everything is going down right now. We live in a kind of, totally debt burdened society by design, and it's been financialized, and it's great for the financiers, and it's horrible for working people and kids and youth who are trapped in debt, and everybody else who's trapped in medical debt, 100 million people, and child poverty just doubled. It's like you have to really put the blinders on not to see that the economy is in really dire straits. The climate is in a state of collapse right now. And then we have these wars that are totally flying off the handle, and genocide is kind of the symbol of that. So we have a system that is in free fall right now, and our democracy along with it. It's not like Trump will create the crisis of democracy. There is a crisis of democracy that Trump reflects, and we need to get a grip here and take control of our direction here, and stand up and use our votes and our voices to move forward in a way that creates an America and a world that works for all of us. We are going to get our campaign on the ballot, and we are on track right now to be the only pro-worker, anti-war climate action choice on the ballot across the country. And the forces of Wall Street are going to be dividing up the vote many ways in these other options. So I would say seize the moment here and pay no attention to that guy behind the curtain, who's pretending to be a magician and pretends like he knows what's going on, because he doesn't. These proponents of Wall Street and the Wall Street parties are just, protecting their little hold on power, their little stranglehold. So really use the courage of your convictions, and let's stand up and create the world that we deserve, that we do have the power to create. In the words of Alice Walker, the biggest way people give up power is by not knowing we have it to start with. We do have it. And in the words of Frederick Douglass, power concedes nothing without a demand. So we've got the power. We need to make the demand. And we can do that. And we've got a campaign that's making it happen. So I really urge people to abandon Biden, dump Trump, and join Jill and our team. Go to jillstein2024.com and, hold on to your hat. This is an amazing, historic moment, and let's use it for all it's worth. Our very lives depend on it, all of us.
Well, thank you so much for those words, and thanks for your time. And we'll be rooting for you all the way. Let's go out with a song. And I thought before I let you go, I was going to play a track by Mercedes Sosa called "Solo le pido adios."
Adios. All I ask of God, que la guerra no me sea indiferente. All I ask of God is that war not make me indifferent. Really beautiful song.
Beautiful sentiment. Thank you, Jill. We'll see you
Thanks,
down.
Malcolm.
We'll see
Great
you,
to talk.
see you down the campaign trail. Thank you so
I
much.
hope so.
Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Solo le pido a Dios que el dolor no me sea indiferente, que la reseca muerte no me encuentre vacía y sola sin haber hecho lo suficiente. Solo le pido a Dios que lo injusto no me sea indiferente, que no me abofete la otra mejilla después que una garra me arañó esta suerte. ¿Cuántos no lo olviden fácilmente? Solo le pido a Dios que el futuro no me sea indiferente. Desahuciado está el que tiene que marchar a vivir una cultura diferente. Solo le pido a Dios que la guerra no nos sea indiferente. Así es un monstruo grande y pisa fuerte toda la pobre inocencia de la gente. Gracias. Es un monstruo grande y pisa fuerte toda la pobre inocencia de la gente. Muchas gracias, señores. Gracias, Nicaragua. Muchas gracias.
That was Mercedes Sosa